Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Well, winter has paid us a visit here in the Ozarks. It's about 24 degrees when I woke up this morning at 5:30, and winds are anywhere between 25 and 30 miles an hour, and some of the gusts are probably close to 40 because there's some pretty strong gusts every once in a while. So it's making it pretty chilly out, which is why I'm inside the shop, which is not insulated yet. We haven't got to that part, but at least it's cutting the wind down. But hey, that's the life, right? And it's kind of fits with the video today of preparing yourself, and not just in a physical way, which we talk about often, but today we're going to talk about mentally preparing yourself for what's coming. Even though we don't know exactly what's coming, there's ways that you can just prepare yourself mentally in general that no matter what happens, you're going to be psychologically and mentally sound and ready for that, whatever comes at you. Before we get started, I want to say thank you for watching. If you would not mind, to go ahead and click the like and the subscribe button down below. That's the best way to overcome the YouTube algorithms that's trying to censor content just like this on this channel. They just don't like this kind of information getting out. And so if you'd go ahead and subscribe, and off to the side there's a little bell, you can click that icon, and that way you get notifications, hopefully, when I post a new video, which is just about daily. So how do we prepare mentally? One thing that, and many of you are going to know exactly what I'm talking about because you've had a lot of training in your life. Maybe you're ex-military, even possibly some type of combat infantryman or special operations. And so you're totally going to know exactly what I'm talking about because this is part of the training that you've received. And so a lot of you are saying, well, wait a minute. You're talking about preparing mentally for, whatever's going to happen. Why are we talking about, combat style training? Because it fits. We don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, we have all these theories, and there are some things like we talked about yesterday about the financial collapse that seems pretty certain, at least at some level. There will be some level of financial collapse because of the doom that's just pending, this dam that's cracking and breaking of the U.S. economy. I mean, we're inching close to $30 trillion in national debt, and things are just constantly being shut down all over the country. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places. So the idea that nothing's going to happen with the economy and it's just going to bounce back and everything be perfect is highly unlikely. Then there's this health crisis, and there's the election debacle, the Great Reset, and the fact that more and more the phrase Civil War has become just almost a normal daily use with a lot of people. People that would never ever consider something like the Civil War, a Civil War here in the United States happening, are talking about it on a regular basis. So the possibility of something happening over the next coming months is very, very likely, very real. And so what we have to do is prepare for that. Many of you, it's going to be easy. Like I said, you've gone through some type of training. Maybe you've seen active combat. Maybe your life has just been a little bit more tough than others. And so your mental strength is there. But for the average American, it's not so much that they're weak. It's just that they have lived a fairly comfortable lifestyle. And I'm not talking about just the wealthy or the upper middle class. Even the poor in America live a much better lifestyle than the vast majority of the rest of the world. The poor in America are not considered poor at all when you compare them with the poor in other parts of the world. So we have lived a very comfortable lifestyle for the most part. And I know that's generalizing it a lot. The average person in the United States has not known what it's like to have their life threatened or to live in fear of their life being threatened on a daily basis. Most people in America have never lived a life where they're uncertain of where their next meal will come from. They will have never lived not knowing what it's like to go to sleep at night in a bed and to have warmth in their home and a roof over their head, and to not live in fear of someone, something, or a government, beating down their door to infringe upon their rights or to monitor them or to control their life. The average American has not experienced that. And so when you look at all the possibilities of things that's, can happen over the next few months, there are many scenarios that could play out where the average American citizen has never experienced anything like that and probably has never really thought about what it would be like to live through that. And so that's where mental preparedness comes into play, where we develop our mind now while we still can, so that when we go through those things, it's not going to be so overbearing and overwhelming, and it's not going to cause us to have a mental breakdown. And then once that happens, it's very difficult, regardless of what you have, regardless of how many preps you've stored away and how many bullets you have and all that. If you don't have it up here, then you're not prepared. I mean, it's just as simple as that. You can have the best bunker, the best gear, the best preps, but if you're not prepared up here, then you're not prepared at all. And so today I want to talk about some tips and some things that can get you prepared. And so while we're talking about mental preparedness, if you're still trying to physically prepare with things like food, and you're interested in long-term freeze-dried foods, I do offer them through preparedwithtravis.com. I work with My Patriot Supply, which offers great long-term stored products. And you can get on there at preparedwithtravis.com and get $100 off for a month's supply of food. One of the first things you've got to start thinking about is becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. Okay? Again, we live a very comfortable life, right? We have air conditioning, we have heat, we have food when we want it, we have the clothes that we need. Even those of us that may not have the finances to live the life of luxury we wish, we still have the very basics and even above the basics to get us through in life to have a pretty comfortable existence. But it could come a day, and it could come very soon, that a lot of those comforts will be gone. You may not be able to afford your electric bill. You may not be able to afford the food that you need, and it may not even exist, even if you could afford it. Your money may be worthless. You may have to leave where you're at and go live somewhere else that's much less comfortable to live. So becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. In battle, a soldier many times may have to spend long periods of time in places that aren't comfortable. They may have to live in a jungle where it's hot and sweaty and moist and everything's damp and wet all the time. Or they may have to be in the desert where it's so arid and dry that their skin just cracks and bleeds. They may not have the food that they need all the time. They may not have the bathroom facilities that they would like to have. They may not be able to bathe on a regular basis. They may have to go weeks without bathing. They have to find comfort in the uncomfortable. Because if they don't and they focus constantly on being uncomfortable, it can drive you mad. So you have to start now telling yourself over and over again that I can find comfort in the uncomfortable. I can find ways, even in an awful situation, whether it's not being able to get the food that I want or get food at all. Maybe it's going out and growing, raising, hunting, harvesting your own food from nature, eating things that just aren't as palatable as what you're used to or things that you don't like. You can find comfort in that. And a lot of it is just psychological development of telling yourself that you can get used to this. You can be okay with this. You can be comfortable with this. Because there's a vast difference between what's uncomfortable and what's unsurvivable. Many things are survivable. They just may not be comfortable. And so we have to get to that point. And even if what happens in the future isn't as awful as what we're talking about today, if you have mentally prepared for the worst, then you're prepared for things that are less than that. And that's the same way with preparing physically with our preps. If we prepare for the worst as much as we can, then we're prepared for just about anything. Emergency conditioning. This is a really big thing, and this is something that I'm doing on a regular basis. If I'm out working, if I'm in the garden, if I'm kind of doing things, mowing, and I'm able to kind of zone out, I am preparing my mind, conditioning my mind for an emergency. And what that means is visualizing the battle, okay? This may not be a physical battle, and it's very possible that what we're going to be going through could become physical. It could become violent. It has already in some cities. We've been aware of that over the past few months, but it may not happen. But when I'm talking about battle, I'm not necessarily talking about guns and physical and that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the battle to get through an economic downturn, to get through a pandemic, to get through encroaching and tyrannical government, whatever that is the battle. So visualize that battle. Imagine in your mind the things that can happen. And imagine the worst case scenarios. And then play through your mind different scenarios of how you would survive. If you weren't able to go to the grocery store because there's no food there, how would you survive that? If you weren't able to buy things because your money is no longer worth anything, how would you survive that? If you had to escape and evade to a different place because where you're living is no longer safe, how would you survive that? So play out these scenarios like a battle in your mind and try to create all in your mind the different ways that you can get through all these different scenarios. And so when you actually are faced with those scenarios, you've already played it out in your mind, and you're much more likely to survive it and come out ahead at the other end because you've already played that out in your head. Another one is really big, situational awareness. This is something that you should be training yourself to do all the time. I've done other videos in the past on this. And situational awareness is simply the ability to identify, process, and comprehend critical elements of information. Or it's just being aware of your surroundings. Being aware of your surroundings when you're out in public. Noticing people that look a little bit odd or their behavior is a little off. Noticing escape routes. Noticing places that you can get behind cover. Noticing the political climate of what's going on around you, the things that are happening in government and in the global atmosphere of politics, noticing the environment and how things might be changing, noticing food supplies of how they fluctuate. These are situational awareness things, not just what's going on in your immediate circle, but knowing what's going on in the world around you. And so developing situational awareness skills can do a lot in a survival situation. Here's just something a lot of people don't think about. Create a trigger thought. And what I mean by this is think of something now in your life that is worth living for. Think of the worst case scenario. If you are dying, if you were locked up in a dungeon, okay, and you couldn't see the light of day, and you were in this place of despair that you think, life isn't worth living anymore. You know, I'm a prisoner of war. Think of prisoners of war in Vietnam and what they must have gone through, or in World War II. And then think of a thought, something, a person, a place, whatever it is, that would be enough hope to get you through that. Something that you can focus on, that this one thing is worth living. Maybe it's your child. Maybe it's your parents. Whatever it is, that it's worth living, that it's worth fighting for. Think on that and develop that thought right now in your head so that in the future, if things got really bad, if you got to a place of depression, if you got to a place that you felt that it was no longer worth surviving, that things are so bad right now that I just can't make it. This is too awful. I've lost all my money in the stock market. All my retirement is gone. All my investments, my home, I'm losing my home. I worked so hard for this, and I'm getting evicted because I can't pay for my bills. I lost my job because of the shutdowns. My money's no longer worth anything because the dollar has completely crashed. It's not worth living anymore. And then that's when you think of that thought. That's worth living for, and you focus on that person or that place or whatever it is. And so that's developing a trigger. And that thought in those times of great despair can trigger you to survive and push even longer. So do that now. Develop that trigger. Here's another one. Become more disciplined. I mean, that's just simple. That's why in the military they focus a lot on discipline, because they know that developing that discipline and that muscle memory, when things get bad, the discipline and the muscle memory kicks in. And you don't have the time to really sit there and kind of think about, oh, should I do this or not? Or how do I do this? Or things are getting really bad, and the panic and the fear kicks in and the emotions become overwhelming because the discipline and the muscle memory kicks in. So do that now. Start developing more discipline in your life. Learn to find ways to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. This goes back to the first thing of finding comfort in uncomfortable situations. So do that again, because I think that's very important. And that's why I mentioned it twice, is finding comfort in an uncomfortable situation. It is possible. There's many stories of men that's gone off to war, and they've had to be forced into a very uncomfortable, physically uncomfortable situation. And maybe they needed to take a nap. Think of it, a scenario where you're in this jungle and it's awful, or you're in the desert and it's awful, or you're up in the mountains, you're in the cold, you're in the heat, Navy SEAL that's in the water for hours and hours, and they actually take a nap while they're, in the water. A very uncomfortable situation. And they're able to find comfort. With all of this, the one thing that we have to do, and this is also a technique and something that's taught in military training, is learn to separate our emotions from what's going on around us. We live, I feel, in a very hyper-emotional society. I've noticed it just in my lifetime, how much more emotional our societies become, how much more fragile our emotions. We become offended very easily. As a society, we allow our emotions to take over far too easily. And that's just not a good way to be in a bad situation, because then you allow your emotions to take over, your fears to take over, and you become basically paralyzed and unable to move forward. In a combat situation, in a battle scenario, and whether that's a physical battle or a mental battle, you need to be able to separate those emotions, even if it's just for a while, so that you can focus on the goal, you can focus on survival, and you can continue to move forward and not become paralyzed and stagnant, because when that happens, that's when your life truly becomes threatened. You have to be able to constantly move forward, even if at times it's just baby steps, even if it's just a little bit of movement. You still must move forward and be able to set aside your emotions for a while and focus on survival and focus on getting through the rough patch that you're in. It doesn't mean that you become completely numb to things and your emotions die. It's just that you learn to kind of put them on pause, set them aside so that you can focus on the goal ahead. While these tips that I've given today might sound extreme, you might be thinking, well, I'm not going off to war. Maybe we're not. It's possible that in the near future we could start seeing more violent combat scenarios because of, say, a civil war or something like that. But even if we don't, the things that it's possible that we will go through over the coming months and years, developing combat style mental toughness can greatly help in your survival in the long run. All right. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.